Good morning, folks. It's a brisk morning out here in Nebraska. We're probably 36 degrees out here in the shop this morning, and the weather's starting to turn. So we're going to talk about winterizing your homestead. But before we get into that, let's welcome our new subscribers to our channel. Joseph Woodworth, Hayarazan, Zachary Sawyers, Morgan Lynn, David Ezrelo, Thomas Steckler, Ronnie Quilts, and Shayla Kimple. Some of those names I recognize, so we welcome you to the channel, and we hope you enjoy our content. And if you do, share it with other people so we can help out as many people as we can. That's our goal here on YouTube. We don't make any money doing this, so I'm not going to beg you to subscribe and like our channel. But it does help the algorithm a little bit, and it helps us get out to other people. So share with your friends that are like-minded and you think would like our content. So let's talk a little bit about winterizing. So there's a pretty broad range of items you need to start thinking about when the weather starts getting cold. Looking at the forecast this morning, we're going to be dipping down to 30 degrees by Friday. So perfect time to winterize. You want to start watching your weather. And depending on where you are in the country, will dictate exactly what you got to do. But some things, no matter where you live, it's a good idea to do some of this stuff. So we're going to start off out here in the garden. So we're starting this morning in the greenhouse. We have some tomatoes out here that we're wanting to take a little further into fall. So we got them planted in here in the greenhouse. You can see them growing here. Still setting some new tomatoes. But until now, we've had this window open here in the back with the box fan in the window. And on this timer here, we got it coming on about 9 o'clock and then going off in the evening when it starts getting cooler. But it's cool enough now during the day, and unless we get another warm snap, which I don't think we're going to get, we've closed this window, and I've turned the box fan so it blows up and just kind of circulates air in here and doesn't bring in cold air from the outside. This morning we are looking at, it's about 40 degrees in here now. It's still below that out in the shop, but we're starting to get some sunshine in here. But we need the cold air out of here now, especially if it's going to freeze. And if we start getting some hard weather, freezing weather, we'll start this space heater down here to come on at night if we start dipping too low. But that's about it. All we got to do in the greenhouse. So let's go back in the shop and we'll discuss power equipment. Before we do that, still out in the garden, you want to get all your garden hoses, especially if you live in a colder environment like we do. Normally we leave them all out during the season because we use them pretty often. But in the winter, especially out here in the Midwest, you got to drain all your garden hoses out. So we'll get all these hoses and we'll get them disconnected and we'll drain them out, kind of like the firefighters do, you know, throw it over your shoulder, drain the hose out. And then every time you use a hose, you got to drain it out, especially if you want to use it again during the winter, if you need to use it to hose something off or whatever you would use a hose for. And out here in the Midwest, we have these things they call hydrants. These things right here, they actually turn the water off way down in the ground so they don't freeze. So once you close that valve, which we've had them open all season, now we're going to close them and drain that pipe will drain out to keep it from freezing, and we'll drain all these hoses out. We're going to drain out all of our drip tape and make sure there's no water standing in it. So if it freezes, it's not going to hurt any of that. We've got some of our winter vegetables planted out here, some broccoli and Brussels sprouts and such. But make sure all your hoses are clear, drain those out. And then when you want to use them, you can use them and then just drain them out again every time you use them. And I know if you live in the Midwest, you know all this stuff, but some of you may be new to the Midwest this year. Coming and starting a new life out somewhere where you still feel free. So you'll need this information. So you got to think about fuel for all your stuff. The first thing being we need enough fuel for our wood stove out here so we can keep the temperature high enough in the shop where we can actually do some work out here. So I've stocked up my fuel pallet over here, my firewood pallet, and I built that on a pallet so I can take it in and out of here with the tractor when I need to fill it, so I don't have to haul all the wood in here. But I got a pretty good supply. We're most likely going to have to restock that before spring, I'm sure. But I've made sure we got enough firewood in here. And of course, if you have a wood burning stove in the house, you'll need to do the same thing. Make sure you got plenty of wood. Now let's talk power equipment. All of your power equipment, you need to drain all of the fuel and run them dry if you're not going to be using them. I've already done it with the rototiller. We ran the rototiller dry. We need to do this with the chainsaw. I'll dump all the gas out of that and we'll run it dry. And any other power tools that you have that run on gas or diesel need this done to them if you're not going to be using them over the winter. Now, I used to be one of those guys that would just let stuff sit when I was done with it and expect it to work again in the spring. That's not the case. If you talk to any small engine repair guy, his busiest time is in the spring because people have let stuff go, left all the gas in it, and they go to start it up in the spring and it won't start. The biggest reason for small engines going bad to where, I don't want to say go bad because they're not bad, but making them to where they don't work is leaving old fuel in them. And my small engine guy has confirmed that on many occasions. So if you burn the fuel out of there, it's not going to shellac up on you and cause you carburetor issues. And that's the number one cause of small engines failing and not starting is old gas. And my small engine guy told me a long time ago, he said, don't keep gas any more than a month. Burn that stuff up. If you're not using it, get rid of it. He said, you're not even doing yourself a favor by buying the high octane fuel at the fuel station, thinking that you'll put a higher octane in your small engines, help them run. He said that fuel in the higher octane tank stays there a lot longer because not everybody buys it. And it'll start going bad. So don't think you're doing your equipment a favor by buying that high octane fuel. He said, buy the cheap stuff. It's the freshest gas that you can get. And that's what you want. So make sure you run all your stuff out of gas. When you put gas back in it in the spring and want to start it, it's all going to start. Now, because the carburetor's dry and all that, you might need to give it a little kickstart. What I usually do if my engine doesn't want to start right away, I'll take the air filter off. Make sure you clean those too. But I'll dump a little gas right down the throat of the carburetor. It'll fire up and it'll help pick up the gas out of the tank if it's been run dry. Now, if you're not using a lot of gas and not using it up on a regular basis, you need to add some of this to your fuel. That stuff right there called Stabil. That keeps your fuel from shellacking up on you and ruining your carburetor, clogging all your jets. Some people claim that it doesn't work, but I'm a firm believer. I've used it for a long time. If I have a gas can that's sitting around for a month or two, you use that stuff, you don't have any problems. And it doesn't take very much, and it's not that expensive. It's pretty cheap stuff, and it's cheap insurance to make sure that your stuff's going to run when you want it to run. That's all she wrote. You would be surprised how many free pieces of power equipment that I've got in the past where people have left bad gas in it and it doesn't start and they just go buy a new one because they think it's bad and they throw it away. Well, all it needs is a little carburetor cleaning and it fires right up. These small engines are like bulletproof, man, unless you run them just completely dry of oil and just burn them up. These things will run for a long, long time. I've had power equipment for 20 years. It's still running strong, never a problem, as long as you don't let that carburetor gum up. Now, my backup generator that I use in case the power goes down out here, we bought a 12,000 watt generator. So this will run anything in the house if the power goes down. I don't have to turn off anything. I can run whatever I want. And it's a dual fuel generator, and it runs on propane or gas. I run it on propane because you don't have the fuel issues in the carburetor with the propane, because it doesn't gum up like the gasoline does. So I keep a big bottle of propane here for my generator, and I'm going to go buy another one of these bottles this year. So I have one on standby. I also have a little bottle that I can use. But that's what I use for my generator, so it's more reliable, and I don't have to worry so much about gas. Now, one thing we're going to do, we've been starting this thing once a month, every beginning of every month. We run it for about 20 minutes, make sure the battery stays charged and all that. So I don't keep using fuel by doing that. I'm going to go get me a battery maintainer to put on this battery. And by maintainer, I don't mean just like a battery charger. They have maintainers that you hook to your battery that actually cycle a little bit and keep your battery fresh instead of just a constant charge. If your battery doesn't need a charge, it doesn't provide it, but it will cycle the battery a little bit to keep it fresh. I highly recommend you do that with anything that's got a battery on it that's going to be sitting over the winter. We have battery maintainers on everything, and I'll show you what those look like when we get out to the barn. So while we're on the subject of batteries, if it gets super cold in your area, like it does here, if it gets cold enough, these batteries are no longer going to function. They're going to show like red lights up here because they'll get all jacked up in the cold. So if you want to make sure, if you're going to be using little power tools during the winter, you may want to take this inside, put it in your garage or basement or someplace that's a little more climate controlled, and these will be ready when you need them. I did have a problem with them last year out here, but once I fire the wood stove up and bring the temperature up in here, say 20 degrees, I don't have the issue anymore, so I just leave them out here. Now here's one of those battery maintainers I was telling you about. It actually maintains and cycles the battery, and they're not that expensive. The boat has one on it. We hardwired one into it up underneath under the battery so it's protected by the weather, and I keep this plugged in all the time. And the camp trailer has a battery charger built into it that also maintains the battery, and then we can also plug in if we have power wherever we're at. If not, we just run off 12 volt. But I have this one here. I'm going to put this one on our generator in the garage, and then I'm eventually going to get one here for the lawnmower, and I got to get another one for the four-wheeler over there. The tractor we use enough in the winter that we don't have to worry about the battery going dead on that. Now the lawnmower we're still going to be using for a little bit here in the fall for picking up leaves and stuff like that. So we're obviously going to keep some fuel on hand for this, and we're going to make sure that we put the stay bill in the fuel because it may be sitting a while. And once we're done in the fall and we start getting the snow and all that, we'll make sure that we run this thing completely out of gas. So again, we don't have the problem. But we're going to keep using this. Any water-cooled engines, you need to make sure that you got plenty of antifreeze in the motor and not just like water. Make sure if you're in a really cold environment that you got the antifreeze that gets down low enough. And we're going to go over that a little bit with our old John Deere tractor. Now, anything that runs on diesel, if you live in the Midwest, you'll know that you need to make sure that you have winter blend diesel in your diesel equipment. If you do not have winter blend diesel, you take the chance if it gets cold enough, your diesel is going to gel on you and plug up your fuel filters and everything else, and then your equipment's not going to run when you need it. So make sure this time of year that you're putting winter blend diesel into your equipment. So run your equipment out of fuel. I only have About a half a tank left in here, but we have some work that we need to finish up before it gets too cold, and then I'll burn that out of there. And when I go into town later today, I'm going to pick up some of that winter blend diesel to put into this. The four-wheeler, we're going to drain all of the gas out of that and run it dry, but we will have a can of gas on hand in the barn if we need to use it for some reason. Now with that can of gas, it's just not going to sit there all winter. If it gets to be about a month old or so, I just dump it in the truck and take my can in when I go fuel my truck, and I put new gas into the can, always keeping that can fresh. Now old Patsy here, when we started this thing up during the summer, when my buddy Matt was here, the radiator was a little bit low. So I put water in the radiator just to top it up. So because I did that, probably screwed up the ratio of antifreeze in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain some out of here, see what it looks like, see what the color looks like. And I'll drain about a gallon out probably. And if the color looks good, I'll replace it with a gallon of just straight antifreeze in there. All right, we got Patsy all taken care of. When I drained the water out of there and antifreeze, it looked a little brown and nasty, so we're just going to do full-on flush. I just drained it completely empty, and we can let it sit like that for a while. But next time I go to town, I'll buy some new antifreeze in there, and I'm just probably going to run 100% antifreeze in this thing, just so I never have to worry about it. So let's move on to other things. Oh, I forgot to tell you, it's a good idea all the time, not just during winter, to put cans over the top of your pipes. You do not want rain getting down in there, and that'll cause your motor to seize up pretty quick if that fills up full of water. Plus around here we have those little, I don't know if they're called mud daubers or little mud hornets or where they are. Last year, before I purchased this thing, they'd actually got up in here and had this thing almost completely sealed off with mud. So that helps that too, but we got it covered with a tarp, so we don't have to worry about it. Now the boat, we don't have to worry about winterizing because it's still winterized from last year because we never got it out this year. But the fuel tank's empty. We ran this thing out of fuel the last time we used it, and we made sure there's no water left in inside the motor. So it's ready to go. We need to get this thing out next year though. Now with winter coming, we have the chance that we may be pushing snow if it gets deep enough to get the vehicles out of the driveway. So this is also the time to set up your tractor for pushing snow. We have these what's called edge tamers. They go down here on the corners of the bucket, and what they do is they keep your tractor from digging in. So if you're on your gravel driveway or on a grassy part of your yard or whatever, it keeps your blade on your bucket from digging in and rides on these little skis. And it keeps you from moving all your gravel where you don't want it and stuff like that, and keeps you up on top. So we're going to be installing these back onto the bucket once we get that job done I was telling you about. And then also, once we get the bucket on, we're going to turn our tractor around and start backing it into the barn. So if we have a big buildup of snow outside the door, we can push our way out of the barn and don't have to worry about trying to turn around in here. Now let me explain to you what we're going to do out here with the barn. So occasionally the power goes down out here in the country. Not very often, but it does. So during junk jaunt, we found an old outdoor light fixture. We're going to put it right up here above the door. And what that's going to do, when the power goes out, we don't have a way to figure out when the power comes back on. So we don't know when we got it back and when we got to shut the generator down without going out there, shutting things down and switching the switch back over. So the barn out here is wired in before the cutoff for the electricity, because anytime you're generating power, you have to have a cutout that cuts you off of the grid, because they don't want you back feeding the grid, because that gets dangerous and it could harm somebody. So you have to have a complete shutdown off the grid. Well, the barn out here is before that cutoff switch. The cutoff switch is over there on that pole and cuts off the shop and the house. But because the barn here is before the shutoff switch, what we can do is come out here and I'll wire this light into the switch in here in the barn. So if the power goes out, I start the generator and get cut over to emergency power. I come out here to the barn and I'll turn this light on the outside of the barn. So when we get power back, that light will come on because I've got it switched on. And when I look out the front window of the house and I see the light on above the barn, I'll know we have power back, and then I can shut the generator down. So it's kind of a headache without it, so it's going to be a good tool to use. All right, we threw that battery maintainer on the generator. I got to go buy a couple more. Always make sure that your cord that you're using is sufficient. This thing only draws 1.5 amps. So that's a 13 amp cord that we're using, so we are fine. Most of the amperage and everything is listed usually on the cord. The good thing about this generator also is even if the battery goes dead, it's got a pull starter on it, so it'll still fire up. I just make sure the battery's charged just to keep it charged, because it's got one on there, you might as well take care of it. And it's a lot more convenient if you can just push a button and start it. Now folks, remember when you're dealing with electricity and you want to figure out if you're going to overload a circuit, which you never want to do, you're going to cause yourself a fire. Figure out what the watts are of whatever you're running and divide that by the volts, and that'll give you the amps. So you'll know what amps you can run on that circuit. So if you have a 15 amp circuit, you don't want to go over 15 amps. If you have a 20 amp circuit, you don't want to go over 20 amps. If you're ever unsure of how many amps your circuit will hold, go to your fuse box or your breaker box, figure out what circuit it's for, and you can look at the breaker, and right on the end of the breaker, it'll have a 15 or a 20 or a 50 or whatever on the switch. And that'll tell you what the amperage is for that circuit. So you don't want to overload it. So make sure, remember, watts divided by volts equals your amps, and make sure you're under. So now that we've got all of our garden gear and equipment and tools and the homestead up to par, let's talk about vehicles. So getting your vehicle ready for the winter. A lot of mistakes people make is they don't change their windshield wiper fluid to the Sub-Zero fluid. And I use both. You would think that I would just, living in Nebraska, I just keep the Sub-Zero in it. But I find that the Sub-Zero wiper fluid or washer fluid doesn't clean as well. So during the summer, I switch back over. But right now, when we get into town to buy our winter diesel and all other stuff, I'm going to get some Sub-Zero washer fluid and start integrating that into my system. That way, when I need it, it's not all frozen up and won't work. Four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive is pretty much a must if you live in the Midwest. At least front-wheel drive, but there's disadvantages to that. So most everybody out here has got four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive vehicles. Now for you city folks that just happen to have four-wheel drive and haven't used it much, you'll see the little switch here. You've got two-wheel drive auto, which I don't leave my vehicle in auto most of the time. I've got it in there now because it's starting to get cold in the morning. But when you got it on auto, your transfer case is always running, and you can cost yourself a little more gas. So in the summer, just put it on two-wheel drive. But you got 4 high and 4 low up here. Now, most people don't know that 4 high, you can run at any speed just like you would in two-wheel drive. So if you're going down the highway, you can put your vehicle in 4 high, and that's going to give you better traction. If you get into some slippery roads or stuff like that, you got all your wheels turning, and because your steering axles are turning, that'll keep you on the road a little bit better. Now when you go to 4 low, that's when you're going to have to go a lot slower. Most of your newer vehicles will not even let you go into 4 low if you're going too fast. It'll give you an error message on your dash saying slow down to whatever speed. In fact, my truck won't even go into 4 low unless I'm at a stop. And then the gearing only lets you go so fast after that. Now, the other thing we do here in Nebraska is you never let your fuel get below half a tank unless you're just tootling around town and never leave town. And you always got, manicured streets and gas stations right nearby. If you live outside of town or you're leaving outside of town, you never, ever go outside of town without at least a half a tank. If you get stuck in a snowbank somewhere and you're not prepared, you will die out here. If it's 30 below and your vehicle runs out of fuel and somebody doesn't find you fairly quick, you will die. Believe me. So even out here, it's illegal to bypass a stranded vehicle in the winter. You don't do that. You stop and see if they need help. Another thing we do is we keep our winter gear in the truck. So I keep my insulated coveralls and a jacket in the truck at all times. Always make sure you leave the house with good footwear. A lot of times you don't feel like putting on the good boots or something like that. You just want to do your slip-on shoes or whatever, because that'll get you in, out of the house and into the truck, because you don't get very cold just from the house to the truck. But you got to think about being out and exposed to the weather if you're leaving home. And you better have that stuff in the truck if you need it. So have your heavy boots in the truck if you don't want to wear them in the winter. Make sure you have the stuff you need. My wife and I, Kelly, also keep a go bag in both vehicles that have a couple bottles of water and some shelf-stable snacks like beef jerky and granola bars and stuff like that. Anything that you don't have to worry about going bad. You keep a go bag with that stuff in there. So if you do get stranded out in the middle of nowhere, you got something to eat, you got something to drink, and you have warm clothes to put on. If you've got a weak battery already, if your car kind of goes before it starts, you get into winter, it's not going to work at all, because cold makes a weak battery even weaker or not work at all. Now, another thing you need to think about with your vehicles is what kind of fuel you're running. Same thing with the tractors. If you're running diesel, make sure you're running the winter blend diesel. And if you have a diesel, you want to think about a block heater. Now, if you're new to the Midwest and you've never used a block heater, a lot of your vehicles, especially diesel vehicles, will already have them installed. So you'll come in here underneath the radiator and up underneath the bumper down here, and on like a frame rail, you'll see a cord that's tied up with an electrical plug on the end. So you just undo those ties, and then the cord will stick out. You can pull it out through your grill or through your air dam down there. And that's your block heater. And you plug that in at night, it'll keep your diesel motor warm, and it'll fire right up for you in the morning. Now, a gas vehicle, you pretty much don't have that issue. It'll fire up because the gas is more volatile than the diesel, obviously. But I tell you what, the remote start sure is nice. It runs for 10 minutes, and really cold mornings, I'll run it twice, because it'll run twice. And I sit in the nice toasty comfort of the house and press that little button, and my truck fires up and is toasty warm when I get out there to leave. Now, in the back of the vehicle, I have this box. It's got all my stuff in it, so I don't have to carry it in the cab of the truck. I've got tire chains, I've got ropes, I've got tie downs, I've got just about anything you need. I've got coveralls. If I have to get out and change a tire or something like that, I can put my coveralls on. I've got knee pads in there. I've got a tarp in there that I can lay out on the ground. I've got a T-bar lug wrench in there. And if you didn't watch my trailer hauling video or trailer towing video, if you get a tire on a trailer, the lug wrench on your vehicle is not always going to be the same size that you'll need for your trailer, and you'll be out of luck. I've come across a lot of vehicles, motorists that didn't know that. They just thought, oh, I'll use the one in my truck and my jack and all that. Doesn't work. So buy you one of those cheap, inexpensive T-bar lug wrenches at the auto parts and carry it with you if you're going to be pulling trailers. So as far as the vehicle goes, that pretty much well sums it up. Make sure your tires are good. Make sure your vehicle's in good service condition. Just prepare yourself for the worst and you're never going to have the problem. So let's talk about inside the house now. Now let's talk windows. Some people take their storm windows on and off every year. We do not. We leave our storm windows up, so we don't have to mess with that. We have older single pane windows on this house, so the storm window kind of gives us a little insulation barrier in there. And let me tell you something a little bit about storm windows if you leave them up. Do not silicone the bottom of these windows, because water does get in here through your weep holes and stuff, and if the water can't escape down here, it's going to rot your sill out. And that's what happened to some of the sills on this house. I removed this storm window and the one over here by the porch this year, and there was big rotten spots in the corner, and I had to dig out all that rotten wood till I got down to good wood, and then they make an epoxy filler that replaces that bad wood, and it's like you never had a problem. But don't silicone this bottom edge so the water can come out of there and you won't have that problem. You want to check your furnace filter. You shouldn't only do this in the winter. You need to be doing it all summer too, because you're running your AC and it uses the same fan and system. But you see this has got a slide-in filter here. You just pull that filter out and slide a new one in. Pay attention to the airflow arrows on the side of your filter. But you need to be doing that about probably no more than every couple months. Make sure that's going on. Now some of the houses out here will have a humidifier built in. That's what this is here. So during the winter, if the air gets really dry, this will actually put moisture into the air. You can see the switch here that says summer and winter. But we didn't use it last year because we felt it was plenty moist in the house. But that's another thing to think about if you have that system. Make sure you have some bottled water on hand. If your power goes down for a long period of time and you may not be able to pump out of your well if you don't have an emergency generator. Hopefully in your area you don't get real cold, because you better have some type of power to run your furnace to keep everything from freezing in your house. So keep bottled water around. We're going to buy a couple more cases so we have the water on hand when we need it. Make sure you've got plenty of food. Our freezers are stocked from our abundance from the garden this year. The beef that we've bought, we've got a pretty good stock of food. Our pantry is stocked, again, from our abundance in the garden this year. We've got our winter squash down here, potatoes, onions, and all of our canned goods that we've put up this year. Now, if you have outdoor water pipes, you need to make sure those are all insulated. In the Midwest, you don't have outdoor pipes, so you don't really have to worry about it. That goes inside the house so it doesn't freeze. And we already told you about draining the hoses. But if you're in a warmer climate that does have a chance of freezing, make sure all your outdoor pipes are wrapped up. If you have a basement in your house, make sure all of your downspouts are draining out away from your foundation. We keep these around all year long because here in Nebraska, sometimes it rains about once a week. So even in the summer, we have those. Make sure you don't have any old dead snags that if the wind blows them down in the winter, and we even got to worry about that here in the summer. So make sure they're not going to reach your house if they do fall down. If there's anything close enough to reach the house, make sure you take it down before it decides to come down on its own. Now this winter, we're going to take this tree completely out. All it does is fill my gutters full of stuff, and it doesn't provide any protection for the house. But we're going to wait until the ground freezes so we're not screwing up the yard, and we're going to take that tree out like we did with a couple others. And then our house is pretty much free of stuff falling on it. Also, if you have a basement and you have the little cutouts for the windows in the basement, the little wells down here, you don't want a bunch of water going down in there or snow piling up in there against your windows. So if you go to your hardware store, they make these little plastic covers that fit right up against your house. And you can see I got a brick leaning on all of them just to keep them from blowing away in the wind. But that keeps all the snow and the rain and most of the moisture from stacking up there against your windows. So you got to also think about what type of fuel that your house runs on. Our furnace runs on propane, so it doesn't take a lot of electricity to heat the house. The only electricity we need is to run the fan for the furnace. So we're not running big heavy electric heaters. This is a 1,000-gallon propane tank. Now wintertime is not the time to think about filling this thing. What we do is we get the minimum order every month, which is 150 gallons, and then you eventually end up filling the tank. So don't just buy fuel when you need it in the winter. Make sure you have it going into winter. So because our house runs on propane, the heat, we've got plenty of fuel here to run it. It doesn't take a lot of power to run the furnace. Our stove also runs on gas. So even if the power was to stay out or if we had an electrical issue, we can still run our stove and cook food or boil water or do anything we need to do. So figure out what kind of fuel your house runs on and make sure you got plenty of it if you're not connected to like city service or something like that. Turned out to be another gorgeous day out here. Love this fall time of year. And that is the good thing about the Midwest is you get all 4 seasons. You're not just summer and winter, and not much of a winter like out in California. We get just about everything, so it's kind of cool. And getting rain during the summer is awesome. Your grass stays green. This area out here, this side of the driveway and down below, there's no irrigation on any of that, and it's right now middle of October, almost the middle of October, and everything's still green out here. It's not going to turn brown until the frost kills it, which is pretty nice, or if we get a drought year. The only thing that's irrigated is around the house, which that's another thing. We need to shut our hydrant off there and drain pretty much our irrigation lines. And because they go down the hill down there, they will drain. And once we shut that hydrant off, it'll drain out all of the system too. So just another thing we got to do. So that about sums it up, I believe. If you can think of anything else, please put them in the comments. If you're in a different part of the world or the nation, help out our subscribers and put it in the comments if you've got other ideas to share, because that's what this is all about. So I'm going to go have lunch with my lovely wife today when she takes lunch at work, and I got a few other projects to finish up here around the house. And we'll see you next time. Make sure you check out Mark Kelly Farms on Facebook for some pictures that Kelly posts, and come back and see us here on Mark Kelly Farm on YouTube. We love you guys. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.